Hello, and welcome to this comprehensive tutorial of Anytype. If you're new here, Anytype is an app for keeping track of things, be it writing notes, making tables of data, or just having a place to put things to remember. It's quick, safe, offline first, and today I'm going to be showing you how to use it to its fullest. Feel free to download Anytype from anytype.io and follow along, or just sit back and enjoy. Here's a comprehensive walkthrough of everything that Anytype has to offer. Once you've downloaded Anytype, you'll probably be greeted with a screen similar to this. This is where you create your space. Either it's your first space or you're like me and you've made several spaces in the past but want to get a fresh start. Regardless, if you don't know where to go and you've already used Anytype before, just click on this little plus button on the sidebar here. It'll bring up this option to create a new space. I'm just going to call mine new space for the purposes of this video. Press enter. Boom. Here we go. A brand new space ready to be tried out. Now, I'm going to go ahead and right click over here and set this to only widgets. That's going to hide the sidebar of all of these other spaces and the option to create new spaces for me. And that's just to clean up the tutorial a little bit and have it, be more straightforward. We don't really need to see this for the purposes of this video. So here we are, we're in a fresh new space. Let's get started making some very basic notes. Now, it might seem a little bit overwhelming. This try more with Anytype page, I find it to be not the most helpful. So let's ignore this for now and just jump straight in. I'm going to go over here to this plus button. And there's a little drop-down menu that says I can make a lot of different types. But let's just slap the plus button right now and it will make us a new page. You'll see it show up over here. It'll say that it's a page. There's two templates, but we're going to ignore these for now. And we're just going to call this the home page. Now, right away, you can see that there's a lot of different options going on. First of all, we can add an icon like an emoji. You could also add any image that you wanted with the upload, and then the library would just show you all of your previously uploaded images. We'll just stick with the emoji for now. You can add a cover, pulling from places like Unsplash, which is just a free photography site. Again, you could upload your own. I'm just going to go with the light gray. You can add a description. This is the home page, but I don't really find this super helpful to use a lot, just because usually I don't need a description for my page, so you can hide it and then show it again if you want. And you can also play around with the layout width up here and the header position. We'll keep this left oriented just for now. So Anytype has a lot of different options, and for this tutorial I just want to slowly interact with those instead of trying to drown you with information from the very get-go. So let's just look at what we have here. First of all, it says we're a page, and if we open the type, it'll show us, it looks like all of our pages, this try more with Anytype page, and then the home page itself. This is an object type, and these are both of the exact same type. If I click on new object, it'll make me a new page, not a new, video or a new task or something, just a new page. So it's going to mirror exactly what we have here. It's got a couple templates that are created up here. We can obviously make one, we can delete them, we can set them as the default, so every time we make a new page, it'll use this template. We'll leave those alone for now. This little button just resets all of the layouts, so in case we have a bunch of different types of pages, you could reset them all. And then editing the type allows us to edit some things like the name of the type, what layout it uses by default. So there's a couple different options through here if you want to have a profile image, if you want to make it a checkbox or not have a title at all. You can change where the header position defaults to. Again, remember we could edit this on our homepage, but these are all of the default settings. You can set the default layout width, and then some properties, which we'll get into a little bit later. We'll click save on that for now. Obviously, we don't really change anything, but we'll save it anyway. Let's go back to the homepage. So we can also change the type to a different type of object. We're not going to mess around with this too much right now, but some helpful things to remember are that tasks have this checkbox instead of an emoji, and notes actually have no title at all. And this is so that the entire body of your note is searchable as the title. So instead of having to search inside of the note, you can just have everything that you type out be saved as the title. And then that way, when you make a search, it'll be a lot easier to search through. Let's bring this back to page for now. There's also a tag, and the tag is one of those properties that we looked at, and it's shared across every single object in this space. However, we can delete it if we want to. It's not baked into everything. And we'll just call this a system page for now, because if we're making a system, it might be useful to know what pages are, actual content and what pages are just helping us navigate. We can choose multiple tags if we want as well. So, for example, we don't have to be limited to one singular tag. This is a multi-select as opposed to a singular select. Just clicking it will select it or deselect it, but I'm going to delete this option because obviously I just did that as an example. Okay, that's a basic tour of what we've got going on. Let's get into a little bit of text editing. Now, obviously, we can just start typing things here, and these are all typed out into blocks. So what we have going on here is our text, and it's adding these kind of chunks with these little oblong shapes over here on the side. And this is how Anytype works. It's a block editor, not just a text editor. So with something like Obsidian, you start at the very top and you work your way down. And if you want to add more spaces, you have to keep indenting things, and then you've got something at the bottom. Anytype, on the other hand, allows you to grab any of these blocks that you've created and drag them around, which is why in a text editor like Apple Notes, you can't easily put text side by side, but in Anytype you can. And the way you do that is just grabbing and clicking and dragging on these little dots over here, and then you can move them around as your whims. You can also insert extra blocks between blocks, so if you got a really nice page setup, but you want to insert something, you just click there, and it adds an extra block for you right there, with a couple of menu options that we'll look at a little bit later. So just some things to know: you can drag blocks side by side and adjust the width between them. If you find the perfect, there it is. If you find the perfect spot, you can drag them, the space between them. You can also drag a block directly on top of another block, which nests it, and then you can grab both of those blocks and drag them on top of another block and nest all of them together if you so choose. You can't really do that with a blank space, as you can clearly see there. Dragging it into a blank space doesn't indent it into the blank area. And then if you click on this bar over here, there's a couple of options. You can turn it into a link to a new object. You can move it to a new object itself. So if I move this to Tremor with Anytype, it's gone. And we go over here, and it's there. So let's move that back just because. So now I can be editing this page, and it obviously is adding this to the very bottom of the page instead of inserting it where it was before, because it doesn't remember that. So clicking on this, we can also change the text style to make it a heading if we want, which actually breaks the indent, it would appear. We can make it into a callout, or a quote, I think that was. Was that a callout? That was a highlight. We can make it a callout as well, which allows us to put a little emoji next to it as well. We can undo that. And then we can change it to checkbox, bulleted list, toggles. We can align it left, center, or right. We can change the color of that text or the background color of that text. And if you've made a behemoth like what I have here, an abomination to mankind, you can just click on the clear style and it'll all reset that back to regular. So that's all of the options we have from just clicking this box. Now let's look at a couple of the slash commands. As the name suggests, slash commands are used by clicking somewhere and typing a slash. And right away you'll see a lot of very familiar options, ways to edit text, but you can also do a lot more using these commands. First of all, you can embed files, and these actually just create a little box for you to embed files in later. You can also embed videos, PDFs, different kinds of like LaTeX for math, YouTube for YouTube, X if you want to be depressed, Crocky, I have no idea what this is, but if you want it, it can be put in your vault. You can put some line or dot dividers in here if you want to be very pretentious with your notes. You can put a table of contents in here, and this table of contents will require you to use headings. So if we make a big heading, let's bring the table of contents up to the very top. And we can get rid of these for now. And then, of course, if I start typing things under here, it's not going to show up in the table of contents, but if I make a subheading, it will. So the headings, table of contents can be really nice, especially for formatting very large notes. Okay, what else do we have? Inline collections and queries we'll talk about a little bit later because they're a little more complicated. We can add a link to an existing object. We can add a link to an existing file, like a image or a PDF. We can just summon a date if we want. So if we want to say this day, it's then going to actually make a little note for that day. And if we click on that, it's going to show us all of the information for that day, like the objects we've created, everything added that day, everything modified that day, everything opened that day. That can be pretty helpful sometimes. I've never really used them yet, but I'm sure that there will be a use for them at some point. You can just create new objects from here. So if I want to create a new page, if I click this, it would just take me to a completely new page. If we get rid of that, it's going to be sad and say that it's a deleted object, but that's okay. Okay, what else do we have? And then we can add properties. So I talked about these a little bit before with that book example, but this is just a way to add those properties not to every object. So for example, if I click on one of these, it won't add it to every page. It'll just bring it into this page specifically. And you can see these are all properties that are actually applied to pages in general. So you can see over here, all of these options are exactly the same as the options down here. And this just allows me to kind of format things a little bit more aesthetically. If I put the tag here, then, in case, let's say I didn't want it showing up right underneath the homepage header, or I did, but I also wanted it elsewhere, I could just be dragging this thing around, fitting this into my notes, putting it side by side with things, so this just gives you more opportunities if you kind of want to have a more structured approach to your notes instead of having everything under here or hidden away in the properties tab. You could just be inserting them in by custom. So that is the / commands in a nutshell. It gives you a lot of opportunities to really customize your notes, make them look exactly how you want, and bring in data that is relevant to the notes. So with that being said, let's look at making a new object type and what that entails. To make a new object type, we'll go up to our space, we'll click on the name, which gives us all of the settings, and we'll click on object types. You'll see that there's some system types. These are stuck into the system, so we can't delete them. And then there's my types, which we can delete, and we will later. For now, we'll just click a new type, and it's going to bring us into this type editing page. We'll call this a book, because books are a pretty good example for this, and I like books. We'll click on the icon here, and here's a pretty good book. We'll just click that, and blue looks good for now. This shows us the format. Lists are a more complicated type of object we'll talk about later when we talk about queries and collections, but for now we'll keep it at page. The layout doesn't really make sense to make it anything other than basic. Header position, left works for now. Layout width, I always like to crank this a little bit just because you have to let it won't update in live. You have to drag it somewhere and then wait for it to update over here, but I like to leave that up there. Let's look at the properties. Properties are really important, as we've talked about before. They're a way to store data with your objects. So we can see that we have 3 different options: header, properties panel, and hidden. Hidden were the ones that we looked at with the homepage last modified, last opened by. That's pretty fine to leave in hidden in my opinion, because really you don't do a lot with this information. The properties panel shows things that will be on the right side here in the default section that's not hidden, and these will also be on the side, but they'll also be kept underneath the title in this header here. Object type shows me what type it is, and it's useful to have this available right under here if you plan on swapping the type around. So for example, if I made a note and then later wanted to turn that note into a page, it would be useful to be able to just slap the object type, go to the change type, and then bring it over to page. But we don't really care about changing books into things that aren't books, so I'm going to move this down to the regular properties panel. The tag, I'm not a big fan of tags. I don't find them terribly useful, but we'll leave that there for now. Backlinks are also pretty helpful. This just shows if there's any other objects that link to this object. So if I had my favorite book and I wanted to see, wow, this book was mentioned in a lot of different places, backlinks would show me where that is. But we're missing a couple properties, right? Who's the author? How long is the book? So we can just click Add Property here, and it's going to show us all the different options for property types. And then obviously here's all of our pre-existing properties. We don't want the pre-existing ones. We want to create a new property. We'll call it the author. There's nothing that exists like that, so we can create a new one, and then we can choose what we want this to be. We can have it linked to a different object, so this could be useful if we actually wanted to make a little bio on every author that we read. Then we would choose object, and we could limit that object type to maybe an author object type if we had one of those. But we're not going to do that because we're not getting that complicated here. I'm going to go with text for now, because text just allows you to type whatever you want, and unlike tags, where if you make a tag for one note, it will show up as an option for every single other note, text is saved just to this object. So because I read a lot of different books and I don't really read a lot of the same authors, it's much simpler to just store authors for me as text instead of something like select, where it would save that option and then always give me that option later if I wanted to reuse an author. Number is a number. Obviously that wouldn't work for our purposes. Date, file and media, these are all pretty self-explanatory. There's a lot of different options here. The main ones you'll probably use a lot are object, text, select, multi-select, maybe date as well. Checkbox is also pretty useful, but overall I think most of these are pretty clear aside from object, and select and multi-select are just different because select only lets you choose one, multi-select allows you to choose multiple. It's pretty straightforward, but just in case you didn't pick up on that. Okay, we're going to leave this with text and we'll hit save. Boom, now we have the author. I'm going to move that up to the header because frankly that's more important than anything else in the header. And then I'm also going to create a book length, or number of pages actually would be helpful. We'll click that, and this one, a number would make the most sense, pretty obviously. We'll hit save on that. We'll also bring that up here, and boom, there we go. Here's our new object. We'll hit apply, and there's no books yet. So let's create one. I'm just going to pull something from my bookshelf. We'll go with Nicomachean Ethics, which is probably a bad idea because I need to figure out how to spell this. And it's a the, author, Aristotle. Number of pages, I really don't know. I'm going to guess around 400. And then we'll leave the tag blank for now. So here's our book, and it's pretty nice, but it's very blank. And I might want to customize this a little more. So if I want to do that, I can pull out the properties here and drag and drop properties directly into the page. It's indenting this one for some reason because I put it into a block instead of just as a block. So let's drag this up and make sure it's on a line. Boom, there we go. There's our number of pages. We'll bring in the author as well because that's just kind of nice sometimes. And then we'll close this for now. We'll set these side by side. I'm just going to bring the whole thing, the whole shebang, drag and select multiple of them. Bring that up one. Oh, that didn't really work. Oh well. Let's grab this guy instead. Put those side by side there. And then I'm going to make an embed available for an image. And this will be our cover. Actually, I'm going to bring this down there. Hello? Please? There we go. Okay. And then I'm going to add a line above this. I'm going to make a heading up here, and we'll call this cover. Okay, this looks pretty nice. What if we want to use this for other books? Well, luckily we can. We can click on the three dots here and click Use as Template. This is now saved as a template of book. And so, of course, we should probably rename this to be just title. And then it clears out automatically all of our different properties. So you can see the author reset itself and the number of pages reset itself. Now, if we go back to our book type, you can see Nicomachean Ethics, it still exists, it's saved all of our information. But if we go to templates right here, it includes that template that we just made. We can set this as default, and now every time that we make a new book object, it'll show up as, let's open this up, boom. It automatically fills it out with what we designed. So templates, they probably make a lot of sense, but now you can see how to make a template, how to make a new object type, how to make new properties. So now it's time that we talk about queries and collections. Now, the easiest way to actually talk about queries and collections is just to go to one of these types and click on it. And you can see we kind of have this database style going on here, right? We've got different headers for these columns, and every time we make a new object, it inserts more columns. This basically is a query. So what we're going to start with is making a query that looks very similar to this. We'll go down to queries here. And queries you can think of as different kinds of searches. So we'll just call this one the bookshelf. What are we doing with this query? Well, we can see that it's a query very clearly. We can select what the query is, so we can make it search for everything with a certain property or everything with a certain object type. We'll set the object type to book, because that's usually what's on a bookshelf. We don't really need to tag it, so this is kind of why I don't find tags super helpful. You know, why do we need to tag our query? Maybe you could find a use for this. I don't usually. And then we see we have our books right here, the name of our object. We can also add different columns right here. So, for example, it's showing us all of the different properties that are by default associated with books. So we'll add the number of pages, we'll add the author. The number of pages for some reason is kind of glitching out there. And sometimes in order to populate this, you have to open one of these and then go back, and now it's saving this here. Let's add a number of pages to this book just for fun. We'll say it's 74, and then we'll leave the author blank. So some things you can do with a query, you can drag around and make the columns different sizes if you want. You can also reorder them if you really want to. Object type, I like to hide this actually. I don't find it terribly useful. Obviously we know that these are all books because we're searching for things that are books. And hopefully you remember that the bookshelf contains books. You can right click on one of these and you can remove it from the query if you want to hide it. Don't hit move to bin because this will actually delete this property from all of these objects, which will cause a huge mess because all this property is supposed to be applied to every book, but now you just removed it from the books, but now the type wants to add it back. It's not worth it. If you want to get rid of it, just remove it from the query. We can do filters, which we'll look at later. We can align this column if we want it to be aligned in the center, if we're pretentious. And then also we can calculate it. So right now it's at none. We can count, so we can count different things. So for example, the count is 2 because there's 2 objects. It makes sense. We can click on this to edit it as well. We can count the number of unique values, empty, not empty. We can do a percent empty and not empty. We can also do math. So we could sum and say, well, this is all of the pages of the books that I've read of all time. I've read 2 books. One is called New Book. The other one's called Nicomachean Ethics. And this is how many pages I've read total. This can be pretty helpful just in case you have a more complex query. If you had a finances query and you wanted to sum up your finances for the month or something, you could use the sums or what have you. Now, how would I limit this to just books that I've read instead of, all of my books of all time? Because if I fill this out with hundreds of books, I might have some books in here that I haven't read and I might not want to count their pages in this nice little sum. Well, let's walk through the process of making this only books that I have read. We'll click here, we'll add a property, and we'll call this reading status. We'll create a new property, and we're going to save this as a select, not a multi-select, as a select. We'll save that. Boom. Now the property reading status has been created. So if I go back to book and I go to edit type, it's not necessarily going to have the reading status showing up here, right? Because we did not actually link it to all of the object types of books, just to all of the books in this query. But there's actually a pretty easy way to make sure that this gets applied to all of the books. Let's start here and we'll say this is a to-read book. And this one I have actually read. If we go to edit type, we can now see that there's this found in objects section, which says that these properties exist in some objects but aren't part of the type. And this is really convenient because I can say, well, reading status, I want this to be part of the type. I applied it to other objects, so now I can just go ahead and grab it, and I'll bring it up to the header, because that makes it really convenient. We'll hit save, and now every book that we create from here on out will actually have it saved in the header. How nice is that? So now we can go back to our query, go back to the bookshelf. We can see that it's listed here. Let's make a new view. We'll call this read books. We'll leave the layout as is for now. We'll look at that a bit later. We'll look at the properties. I'm actually going to remove reading status because we know that this is only read books, so there's no reason to show that up. Now we're going to make a filter. We can make it from here, but we can also make a filter from these three little lines. We'll go down and find reading status. We'll click all has all of, which makes it very specific, and then we'll click add, and then only read. Boom. Now only books with the reading status read are being saved in this shelf or in this view, and obviously the sum is now correct because I haven't read this guy, but I have read Nicomachean Ethics, and so now it's showing up right here. We can also change the sort. It always sorts by last modified date. I find this absolutely useless. I like to go with name ascending because that way it actually alphabetizes those, but you can also add multiple layers of sorts. So in case you have two copies of the same book, but again, they're different formats and you're really particular about your book format, you could add multiple sorts to put your Kindle books beneath your physical books or something like that. We can also change this view from here. So this will bring us this menu that looks very similar to the one when we created a new view. And this will allow us to actually do some fun things. So let's make a new view just for fun. And we'll click on the layout. This gives us a lot of different options. First of all, we can hide the book icon. So if we don't want to see this little thing here, you can hide that or show that. Gallery allows us to view everything as these cards. You can change the card size. You can change what shows up as the cover. So if you had images on here, you could pull from that cover. You can also pull from the book cover if we actually applied book covers to these, but we haven't done that, so it doesn't give us that option. You can fit media. This, again, is just for those thumbnail images to fit them. If they're vertical images, you can either have them zoomed in and only show a little bit, or you can have them zoomed out and show everything. Show icon, again, we looked at that before. And then the page limit. This is just for rendering purposes. I've never actually pushed this at 260, let alone 120, so I wouldn't know what's best, but I assume 60 is probably safe for now. We can go with list, which just takes our table and makes it a very clean looking list. And then, yeah, that's basically all there is to say about it. Again, we can always show what properties are showing up on that list right here. So if you want more things to show up than just the author and the number of pages, going back from the view, from the layout and into the properties will allow you to choose what is being listed in that little extra section here. Okay, let's look at the other layouts. We've got Kanban, and this allows us to choose what we're grouping by. So we're grouping by reading status here, which is very convenient. And then we can also, if we want to, we can drag around the columns to put, to read before read. So that's pretty nice. I actually really like this layout, and I think it looks pretty clean. We can also color the columns if we really want to, which, again, that's pretty great. I love that. Let's go to calendar. Calendar will pull any property that is a date and put it onto a calendar view. So right now it's only pulling from creation date, last modified date, and last open date. So let's go back to grid actually. We'll make a new relation and we'll call it the read date. We'll make a new property. We'll make it a date. We won't include the time. We will save it. And then let's say we read this one today, and this one we read, we haven't read it, so it's not going to show up on there. Now, if we go and set this to calendar, it will show up as an option here because it is a date property that applies to all of our books. We'll click read date, and now, of course, it's only showing us the Nick because we don't have the other book in here. We can also choose to hide and show the icon just like the other ones. Graph is pretty funny. It's not super useful for something like this, but it could be useful if you had a lot of them, if you wanted to move them around. There's graph settings, so you can see the links from different objects to each other. We'll look more at graph views a little bit later, but just know that it's here, and if you want to be able to flex all of your books and how they link out to other notes, which obviously we don't have here, but if you do, it's an option. I'm just going to keep this as the calendar actually for now because I think it's kind of cool to have that. So that is a query. A query only looks at a specific search basically for either objects or properties. So now you've got that down, let's talk about collections. If we go over here to collections and we create a collection, it's going to look pretty similar from the get-go. Oh, it's informing me how collections work. Okay, so it's going to look pretty similar from the get-go. In fact, we're actually going to call this the bookshelf collection because I want to demonstrate how collections work separately from queries. So I kind of want to make two of the same ideas. Collections don't have a query. They don't have something to search for. In fact, the way collections work is that you link things to the collection. So instead of a query where everything is being shown in the query because it is shared in the query, in the search that we're making, a collection isn't limited by that. A collection you link things to. So if I hit create object, we can make something new, and well, let's say that this is City of God, and this we'll say is that's not what we want to do. Change type. We'll change it to a book. There we go. So yes, this is going to show up in our book queries over here, obviously, but it's also going to show up in this collection. Now we can also put other things that aren't a book into this collection, and this is why collections can be very useful. We can link things that aren't shared by object type or aren't shared by property here. So let's say I want to say I have a little Lego flower pot, because I do. And we'll call this, well, we'll just leave it as a page for now because obviously we don't have a object type for Legos. This collection is now storing multiple object types at once, which can be really valuable if you have something like a messy bookshelf like I do, where I have things that aren't books on my bookshelf. It can also be useful if you want to say, this is all of the objects that I have with me at college, or all of the things I'm storing in my desk, and you don't want to have to make an object type for, college items or desk items. You can use a collection to link multiple different object types together. Now, obviously, we can make our own views. We can customize it all the ways that we customized a query, but we can also, instead of making new objects into it, link existing objects into it. So let's go to the very back. And one quick aside, talking about widgets, we'll talk about these a little more later, but you can see that it's already made a widget for City of God, for queries, and collections. And Anytype will do this. It will automatically make a new widget every time you make the first object of a new object type. So when we just made this bookshelf collection, it brought in a collections widget. So just in case you ever see these popping up, you don't know where they're coming from, that's why when you make new types, it'll make a new widget. You can always right click and remove them if you don't like them here. Okay, so let's go to the home page. We can actually go up to these three dots and we can either add a link in this to a different object, or we can actually add it to a collection. So this way, instead of making a new object in here, and clicking on this actually just makes us a new object entirely, we can add existing objects to this collection. So to watch that again, we go up to these three dots, we click on add to collection, and then it shows us all of our existing collections. You can't do this with queries because a query is already searching for its own things. So it doesn't really make sense for you to, link something to a query because it's already either in there because the query is searching for it, or it can't be in there because the query isn't searching for it. Collections are a much more elegant way to group different object types together. So that's basically all that we have to say about collections, honestly. They function very similar to queries in that you can filter them, you can sort them, you can change the views, you can do all sorts of things. You can also set what object type you want to use as a default. So right now when we click new object, it's making a page, but we could set this to book if we wanted. We could set a custom template for every book that is added to this page. So this is our default type, and then what template from that type do we want to use? So if we go back to page, it's going to show us the templates that come by default with Anytype for pages. So this can be really useful if you want a collection that, it's a bookshelf, it's primarily using books. I did not want to make a new object. I'd rather have it be just books, but obviously we can add other things if we want to. Now to get rid of something from this collection, we don't actually want to move it to the bin, we want to just unlink it from the collection. That'll make it disappear here, but obviously the page still exists, as opposed to if I made a new object like I just did a couple seconds ago and I need to delete it. Don't hit unlink from collection, because then you'll see it'll still show up in the widget over here. It still exists. If we move it to the bin, now it's completely gone. Okay. That's collections. Now let's just do a little bit of housekeeping to finish this video out. First, widgets. We have a lot of widgets over here. You can right click on any of them and change the appearance if you want. So you can make them a bigger section. You can make it just a line if you want to link to all of your collections. You can also remove the widget if you don't even want to see it. If you click edit, you can drag these widgets around and you can also remove them from here. And you can also make your own widgets, which aren't limited to just different object types. You can actually add things like your favorite objects. You can add a section for all objects if you really want to be crazy, and this just links you to every single object you've made. You can also add a specific object. So if I want to add the home page, and then we'll right click on this and make it just a link, then edit, I can bring this all the way to the very top. And then we'll get rid of favorites and all objects because we're not using those right now. So widgets are just a nice way to make your sidebar customized, look very clean, all of that. Now, whenever I make a new Anytype space, I always go into object types and object properties, and I delete everything I can. So for example, here, I like books, we made books. I'll leave notes and tasks because they can be pretty helpful. I always delete project. I hate project. It doesn't do anything. It's basically a page, but with more different properties. It's kind of useful, but again, you could make your own project type if you wanted to, and it would probably be better. So I always delete that. Sadly, we can't delete the system types. It's probably a good thing because we don't want to get rid of things that Anytype actually needs. But then we go to properties. Properties has a lot of old properties. For example, album. You can see it's not used in any object type and it's not used in any object. Why is it here? Because it used to be used in the audio type, but now it's not. It might actually be in here as a template. I don't recall. Nope, there's not even any templates for this type. It's not used. So I go in here, I get rid of things like album, artist, assignee assignee is used for tasks. Don't get rid of that one. It'll just cause problems. Your task will just say this type is deleted and it'll get in the way. Camera, so anything that has to do with, sounds like it has to do with photography or very niche music options, like your focal ratio, that's photography. I know that's not music. Genre, I believe, was used for music. So I would go through and delete as many of these as possible. Why? Not because they're bad ideas, but just because you're not using them and they will clutter up all of your menus when you scroll through your menus looking for the property that you actually want. Boom. Now we have basically everything here is something that we would actually care about, and we don't have to worry about all of that clutter. I also like to get rid of tag. I know that is very controversial sometimes, but tags I just don't like. I don't like that they apply to every object. I don't care about applying data to a book as well as to my homepage. So I would get rid of this. It might cause a little bit of problems with something like our homepage because we tagged it, but you can just see that data disappeared. It's no longer there. So that's pretty clean. It's pretty simple. Make your properties as minimal as possible. Make your object types as minimal as possible, and then work from there to create things that you actually want to have in your vault. Don't accept things as default. You can customize almost anything about Anytype. Finally, let's look at the graph view. In order to make the graph view make sense, I'm going to add some links. So I'm going to do /link, and I'm just going to add a link to, for example, the Nicomachean Ethics. And now if we go to the graph view, we're going to see everything that we own here, and it's going to be showing us, let me zoom out a little bit. Oh, I want to see the titles. Oh well, it's going to be showing us the icon, the title, and then any links that exist. So out here are all of our object types, things like book. And you can see, I tried to point at the screen there. Underneath where it says books, it says type, which means that this is an object type. It is just showing us one of the types from over here. Now we can see a couple of them here. We can also see things that we've created. Here's the Trimorph Anytype page. Here is that collection, and because collections function off of links, remember we were linking things to our collection, we can see that City of God, the Nicomachean Ethics, and the Lego Flower Pot are all linked from this collection. And remember, we just, in our homepage, made that link to the Nicomachean Ethics. Well, now that link is showing up right here. You can see the arrows showing that the homepage links to the Nick, not vice versa. What else is there? Well, anything that you create will show up in this graph view, and sometimes it can be very helpful just to see how your relations and your links all connect together. You can also use it to impress your friends, which is mostly the reason why people use Obsidian in the first place, is to make crazy looking graphs. There's also the flow option, which can sometimes be useful if you want to see how objects completely flow from one another. So this links to the homepage, links from the homepage. I never really use this, but it's an option if you want, and I'm sure there's a creative use that I'm probably not thinking about. All right, that's about it for looking at Anytype. Hopefully you enjoyed this tutorial. Hopefully I didn't talk too fast. Hopefully I covered what you were thinking about. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment and I will look at those. You can request different video ideas and I'll probably be happy to make them because I'm always looking for more tutorials to make, more helpful things to do. If you want inspiration, you can obviously check out my channel, but you can also go to the Anytype gallery, which is down in the widgets. So remember we had widgets, only widgets. Now we go to spaces and widgets, slap this bad boy and you can, oh, yep, I know. You can look at all of these different vaults or spaces that different people have designed. Some of them, if they're designed by Charlotte, I believe she works for Anytype, but a lot of them are just random people who have designed them and uploaded them. And so you can see just different creative uses for Anytype, different aesthetics. Maybe you'll find some things that you didn't even know existed or you didn't know that you wanted, but they'll be in here. So feel free to check this out. If you want to get some ideas, you can just click on one, like Daily Journal, and then you can install it and it will show up in your sidebar right here. So that's a good place to find more inspiration and thoughts for Anytype. You can also check out the Anytype community, which is where they release new update notes that people discuss different Anytype uses. I'm actually on there, and so if you want to chat with me one-on-one, you can always send me a DM over there, and I'll reach out if I have any time, which I probably will. So yeah, feel free to poke around over there, see what's going on over there, and get more involved with Anytype. In any case, I really hope you enjoyed the video. Leaving a like, commenting, subscribing, you know the drill. It helps me out. I'm a poor college kid, so anything that you do is greatly appreciated, but it's not required. But stick around if you're interested in more Anytype content or content on note-taking apps in general. I'm going to be covering things like Notion and Obsidian coming up here. So yeah, just hang out if you feel like it. If you don't, no pressure, and I will see you all in a little bit. So long.